Gary. I'm a student here, a TA here. I'm in the game design program. I've already completed the multimedia program.
Your associate degree?
Do work at my associate's degree. I do work in field at a print shop with vector images. But prior to that, I was also a music DJ, and not like radio DJ, but mixed music down in Chicago for years. So I do have a good chunk of digital sound equipment based off of different programs that were actually, before they were programs, they're actually pieces of machines, which are what these programs that we're going to look at nowadays are based off of. Things like a 606 and 909, Rollins or Yamahas, different companies. And they were synthesizer musics that they used in correlation with keyboards. And then the whole idea of the sound grew into things like MIDI equipment, which on like MIDI equipment you could be a pianist and never play the piano just by reading notes. So you could individually hit the notes on the keyboard and then it would sequence it and then play it at the correct pace and time. So you wouldn't actually have to have the skill to do some of it. It would record individual notes. And then it expanded from there. Where now they have software that pretty much does all of the mixing equipment. Like, have you ever seen in movies or like on the Pimp My Ride or whatever shows on MTV where you see the guy in the sound booth sitting there with this huge panel of nothing but buttons and levers and everything else? Well, in a similar thing, each one of those rows of buttons and levels does like a track recording. So which is what we work with in Sound 2, is the individual tracks, and then it has all the different effects that they can do, be it pitch shifts, volumes, different things like that that they're adjusting manually. While modern technology making it a lot easier on us, we can visually see it. Similar to, and for those of you that are new, I don't know if you've your background on it yet, but a lot of us have used programs here like Premiere. Another one's Flash, where we see a thing which is a stage, which is where we work on everything. So we place all of our items, our characters on there and kind of look at it. And then we have things that are like timelines or ability to play. So on the stage, it's all of our components and what happens on there. The sound programs are very similar, as you've seen if you've loaded up the Audacity program. What we're seeing is, it's a waveform. This is what sound looks like in essence. When you get to math classes, you're going to learn sine, cosine, tangent. Sound is exactly that. It's based off of frequency, which is auscultation of waves, which is sines, cosines. We obviously don't see them, we hear them, but this is a visual representation of what we're hearing. But if we make it even simpler without having to know a lot of the complex, that's a picture. And that's what we're manipulating. We're all artists in some degree, or if not, will be, because that's what our field is. So in a lot of aspects, if we look at it as a picture, it makes things easier. In fact, a lot of the programs are going towards shadowing or mirroring a lot of the same facilities that an art program has. Like an example being is when I want to produce this or publish it out to a form, they've now started calling it rendering, which is the same term we're using in our 3D imaging. They're rendering out the image. This is just a sound image, so we're going to render it into whatever format we might need. Other things that we look at are things that are called dither. In art, dithering is something kind of a blending of the edges, where you can set up a feathering or dithering effect where things kind of blend together. Well, music has that too in its recorded style. At the end of everything, there's small things that we can zoom in on. That'll cause different shapes, different sounds. Early recording was done in 8-bit format usually, or 4-bit. If you remember some of the older Pong games or older sounds, they had those really tinny sounds, or those little Casio keyboards that kids got or things like that, that had a really lower quality. On the basis of 8-bit recording, the problem is how much depth they could record into, how precise were the measurements of the sine cosine waves and what happened. And they would end up on the end of sounds with, instead of having a nice curvature for their sound effects, at the very end, which sometimes you couldn't hear but it made an effect, the sine or cosine actually squared out on 4-bit and 8-bit. So instead of being a smooth line for transition, you might not visibly hear it, but it's there and you can actually hear it when you feel it, for things like harmonics or sound depth. Which is one of the most difficult things they had originally when they were trying to do synthetic sounds and musics, was trying to get that harmonic effect. For those people that play music, some people tune by a harmonic, which is a specific tone quality, which was something that was very difficult for them to replicate due to the limitations on what they could do and play back. So that's the premise and the basis, and then we'll go into why, as us as game designers, want to take a look at music. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of cases for music, if you're working at a smaller firm or smaller department, or like example down the road, at Frozen Codebase, they have a music room, which is an old dusty keyboard, musical keyboard in one little closeted area that they, basically muffled up with some foam. This is when they first started out, because their primary was focusing on the game engine, the graphics, and everything else. So this happens at a lot of different studios where music's the leftover unseen child.
That's right.
Which it's a sad thing, and like when budgets get cut or they're limiting things, an example is Bio down in Chicago. The first people they cut, music department, because they wanted to make sure all the other. Well, when you ultimately look at a game, music can make or break a game. I mean, it's not the determining factor of here's the game, but it sets a lot of different things. Example, and like in the slides you see ahead, think of the game like Call of Duty or a game like that. You have an action adventure game, and they have that deep, rich music. Now think if they were playing that game and you heard Mario Brothers sounds.
Yeah.
Right. You shoot an enemy and it goes boing. Might be good for an offshoot or a comic relief occasionally, but the overall quality of the game would have decreased. Sales, I mean, you could project and guess, but honestly sales would have plummeted. And it might not have, Call of Duty would have never became a franchise where it's Call of Duty 2, 3, 4, but they keep going on. Because it kind of defeats the realm of what they're showing in that whole thing.
Right. Another example is try watching a horror flick without the music playing. It completely changes what's going on.
You get that intensity where they're playing the music, like a classic everyone remembers is Jaws.
Yeah.
Where they're building that suspense with the music. A lot of classical overtures have that same effect. Flight of the Butterflies, or Flight of the Bees, whichever.
Yeah.
Or the old classic, Spear and Magic Helmet with or Peter and the Wolf. I mean, some of the older examples of classical music that still had that same arpeggio or piano forte, allows us soft effects, which were building emotion and feeling, which was the whole premise and basis of music in the first place. They're expressing themselves through sounds. Sounds generate responsive emotions and feelings, so they need to couple what you're producing. Well, back to where we're going. Unfortunately, sound is the unloved child. They get cut off. But if they don't pay attention to what they're putting in, they can affect lots of different things, not just the mood and effect of the gameplay, but the overall gameplay ability, such as download and upload times. Because music can come in large files depending on what style, what format, how it's compressed, how the individual program you're building with changes the compressions. So a lot of it looks at that. But that leads us into our first slide presentation, which has to load up. Give me a brief second. I was going to have them preloaded, but I started talking. And I unfortunately don't get a finger clicker on this, so I'm going to have to keep walking back over.
Do you want one?
Do we have the one in here? Does anyone see?
I don't know, what I'm wondering. Can I just get another one from the library or something, or you can be able to do it?
I can just walk back over to it. I don't need to put anyone out.
Looks like it.
Try it. That it's his razor. Just kidding.
I don't see it's a partnered plug anywhere, so
Huh?
that's
Just pointing in a random direction.
It was by his paperwork. You know what I mean? I mean, that's where the unit was, so.
Or is that for the screen?
yeah, but there's usually a USB plug that goes with it to match. So
Needing assistance with my PC?
Oh, Sean.
yeah, do you
Yeah.
have a USB plug for?
Does that work?
That's not the clicker, that's just for the LCD.
Okay.
Sorry.
One of the clickers, you can get one down from the library.
I'll get one here.
And then you have to put the USB in mine and then pull the clicker.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want it or just?
That's kind of cool.
I'll just walk back and forth.
Right.
For those watching the video later, you'll see me crouching over a lot.
That's all right.
We're looking for, as I said, sound for game design. This one's just basic principles and selection, so what we're looking at on the base format. First you want to define and outline your needs. Hopefully the sound is part of the initial design process, because then it'll tie in and it'll be more smooth later on. But like I said before, unfortunately it's the forgotten child a lot of times, and in projects I've even worked on, the whole project was done and then some guy slapped the sound in after, which is a sad thing. And when I first started out, we didn't realize anything other than that. But as we got going, we started saying, the game would have been a lot better if it wouldn't have loaded so long, which we could have fixed if we would have known better to do some music looping instead of playing a full song through the whole thing. So when your game loads up, you gotta wait for that whole song to download and then it keeps playing. So it causes other problems like that, or sound effects in different volumes. So hopefully, you're looking at all of your needs up front. So you need to look at, the scope and size of your game. We're going to quick cover over these and then we'll go through further in the next slides. You need to look at your space requirements and restrictions on what types you can use, what type of music, what type of file music. That's also into the formats that it takes. Does the system you're using accept MP3s? Does it accept wave compression? Does it accept OGS, OGS, which are all different formats for audio compression, which some have different sizes depending on what you're adjusting it with. Then you also want to keep in mind, style, mood, and emotion, which all sound the same for the most part. They're very similar, but style and emotion are kind of different. You could have an action-adventure with a cartoon style, and you could have an action-adventure with more of a modern futuristic style. So your sound effects due to the style are going to be kind of different on your energy level for the cartoon versus your sci-fi lasers over here or your machine gun. They both have a different style to it. The emotion's the same. I want that emotion of action-adventure, and so does the cartoon character over here, but he's getting that action-adventure and he's going boink when he hits something, and over there you're hearing an M16 fire. So that's why they're a little bit different.
Hey Gary, I was just going to say something real quick. I just want to add to that. One of the things that you guys learn in game design is that once you're in school, you're going to start looking at games to see how they're put together, not just to play and have fun. So now you're looking at how it's put together, and that's the same thing. If you just start noticing things about how a game is designed, and that includes the sound, notice what's put to it, and then how you're feeling, and that just makes you
especially for those of you, which I get to pick on you two in the back, that are going to be starting soon. Your view on games is going to definitely change, or at least hopefully change. You're not just going to look at the game and go, it's fun. Now you're going to look at it and go, well, why is it fun? Well, that's cool. I like this aspect. Why is this cool? And then as you get further into it, you'll see, how is this cool? How is this done? Why does this work that way? And at the same time, you're going to start picking, well, I'd change this or make this better. Just like when you watch a movie, you look at the movie and go, if they would have done this a little bit different. It's the same with the games, and you see how it develops, and you start getting more in depth into it. I got some other tips I'll give you guys later off camera about some things you need to not do.
But it's the same with sound too. You're going to pay more attention to sound now.
You're going to you'll see sound, especially if you start playing with it. We currently don't have
Substitute.
Hi, Ben. So that is the owner of Frozen Codebase. That's Ben Geisler. Very intelligent gentleman. Get to know him. He's a nice guy. He's the only game design company in Green Bay currently. There are a couple other in the area that you'll see, Human Head, Big Rooster, if you look into it. And they do offer...
Nobody talks about Raven.
Go off on the side tangent. Don't wait until you graduate. Start from day one. Collect your stuff, build your portfolio, work on it, network. Dress well, don't wear pajama pants.
I didn't say anything.
All right.
No ties. No ties.
Yeah, you're in
No
time.
test.
Hey, no, hold on. Listen, hold on. The guy at Raven said he would not fault anyone for wearing a tie. Ben said he would,
Yes.
but Raven said they would be fine with a tie. So
Like I said, nobody talks about Raven.
Thank you.
Look at it this way.
A tie's not going to kill you.
No one's going to be upset if you overdress, but they
Yes.
are going to notice if you underdress.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Unless it's Ben, he just has a thing against ties.
And that's fine as long as you know what's going on.
Yeah,
Just don't
you know
put-
beforehand.
Right, don't put your own theory.
But back to sound.
Thank you.
As we're defining the outlines too, we're going to look at the number of and type of sounds, because there's various forms of sounds that are implemented. And then as we're doing all that, we're also going to need to do, and you'll learn this in a lot of the other classes too, project management type classes, needs assessment, skills assessment. So we're starting off with our needs. What do we need? What do we need to fill it? Does this fit the desire? Does this fit what we want for our image? And then we need to look at our skills and resources. What do we have for programs that we can use? What are we going to be able to get? What do they want us to use? What skills does the person I'm working with have? Are they good at this? Are they bad at that? So that way we can more effectively manage what we can produce and hopefully make something better. Because you get the guy that might be great at sound and then wants to dodge out. It happens, so you got to try to encourage him to do that if you're the design lead. Like, I know you've done sound in the last 4, but you're really good at it. How about I grab someone else and have them work with you, you show them, and then on our next project, they'll know more, and then they can start to do sound. So you can kind of resource share and allocate, and then as your group, because you'll be working in groups throughout your entire time here, so you can start to develop each other, and it'll make it easier on you in the long run too. Then you're not stuck doing the same thing over and over. You can experience something else. Or if you're really interested and want to jump on it, say, hey, I really want to do the sound for this one. It'd be really cool. I'm not the greatest at it, but I'm really motivated for it. I do have this passion for music. So then you can kind of go from there and then develop us. So then we're looking at back to the scope and the size. We're looking at the type of game. Is it a simple casual download game? Is it a full-scale AAA game? This is for later on in the career field. For here, it's more so going to be a smaller scale because obviously AAA game taking years to produce. They generally have a full musical score with actual people that have degrees in music that specialize in that type of sound. For example, some of the larger MMOs, like everyone's favorite, World of Warcraft, they had a full professor of music working on that. And they had orchestras planning it all out and people writing the scores for it. And that's just the background music, not to mention all the different environmental parts, the different areas, subparts. And then they also had psychologists working on, because they spent a lot of money and they get to do that because they're huge. They had psychologists looking at how our emotions sprung up from certain tones and sounds. So they did a lot of study on it for that particular game. It's a matter of work with what you have. Us as music listeners, we have an ear of what we know is appeasing. So if we just kind of stick to that realm, don't go too far off to left or right field on something, unless the game calls for it. What sounds good to you generally sounds good to most. Generally, because some people have different choices in music styles. You also have to look at your time constraints and deadlines. That's where more of the scope comes in. I have this many weeks before I have to produce this, or I have a milestone that I have to meet at this point. You don't want to plan out this full, I'm going to write this huge elaborate piece, and I'm going to have wood instruments, and I'm going to have all these different violins, and I want some flute section, and going crazy on the whole thing, and now you're orchestrating a complete Philip Sousa type thing, which you have a couple weeks, a couple months to produce it, so you have to look at what your time frame is, and then you look at what I need. Well, we need a little background sound here, something that's a little upbeat and peppy, and we want to look at their file size, so the magic number for most downloadable games is 5 megs, so if we keep this to this size and just loop it, that sounds nice. That's fine. We got it in 2 weeks, because if you don't make your deadline, you don't get paid, you don't get the job, you lose your job, it all goes on that, so it's part of the scope and deadlines. What does the idea holder and designer want? That's back partially into the emotion and everything else. When you're working on the bigger games, there's generally someone that's an idea or image holder that's kind of part of the original design staff. They're trying to maintain, this is what the game should look like, this is what we want, so they kind of oversee a lot of the different projects. It's not just an individual project manager where you have the person that does the programming, then you have that lead of programming, the art lead. You also have the designer that kind of works with all of them in their meetings. They get together, they look at what's going on, and they go, you know, for the art, I don't know, it's just, he's too flamboyant, he's more of a dark character, so, you know, we need something a little bit more brooding. If we can change some of the lighting effects, give them that feel. Same with the music and the sounds, you know. It's a little squonky on the sounds, you know, I just don't see him kind of then we also got to look at what does the boss want. By boss, not necessarily like Ben is the boss of the company, but more so the producers that are paying the overall bill. There's going to be meetings back and forth with them, and you know, you might send your final project in, or in our case, what is the teacher looking for, which is technically our boss on the end project for each class. But you know, what are they looking for this project? Did we need to have 20 different sound effects going through the whole thing that we spent that extra time, and maybe we should have allocated our time to this other portion? Or does the sound effects in this really make or break the game? Well, then we allocate the time. It makes or breaks the game. Without these sound effects, it doesn't work. You know, there's a game that's out that's pretty popular that it looks like one of these sound programs, but all they're doing is they're launching these little balls at different tempos. Well, the whole premise of the game is based off of sound. As they hit these different platforms, it produces a sound, and the bouncing ball causes the sine wave, which is a music wave. So by the different beats, you're launching different balls at different times to get the different sounds. So you go through on that aspect. Well, on that game, obviously, all of the sound would make or break the game, because the whole thing is that's the premise of the game. Back to other games where, you know, sound isn't as in depth, then you can just get what you want and rich and spend it in. But then we're looking at, like you said, what the boss wants. So what does the producer say? All of a sudden, you're the punk rock guru, and you're like, oh, I really like this type of song or the style, so this is what you're working in. Then you bring it over to the corporate people paying for everything. They kind of look at it and go, you know, that's just a little more risque than we want to produce. You know, could you give us something a little bit more toned down with a little more rich feeling? You know, because they're the ones that are paying the bill. You got to listen to what their wants and desires are too. So then they send it back with their other ideas and suggestions. Then, how much can you ignore the boss? How much leeway do they give you without being upset? You want to work with the vision holder, and this is where their argument is. You as the sound designer just kind of take and implement what they give you and work with it. That battle goes more so through the upper echelon, the designers, the image holder, and the corporate, and they battle back and forth. And then you make what they tell you to make, and hopefully everyone's happy in the end. Space requirements, restrictions, and also, like I said before, formats. These all kind of tie in hand to hand. This affects the amount of sounds and the quality of sounds. When we look at sound, it's generally recorded, and there's two different numbers we look at. One is in a kilohertz, which is like 41, 36, and then there's the actual save size, which goes back to the bits, where we were talking about before with 8-bit, 4-bit, 16-bit. As with memory and anything else, the larger the number, the better. So when you're sitting at 41 point whatever kilohertz and 16-bit recording, you're looking at relatively high quality sound, but you're also looking at a very large file. So generally when you start working, you start with the high quality, and then through different means compress it down, make it smaller, snip off what you can. Always start from high though, because once you go smaller and you make changes, you can't go back up the scale, and it keeps the quality smoother. It's just like a picture. When you're starting with your images, if you start like in Photoshop, you have a little picture, you blow it up, what happens? You get pixelation, it blurs out. Well, sound, as I said before, we saw is just that. It's that image, the picture, that sound wave. If you take a low quality sound that was recorded and already compressed really far, and you're trying to make big changes and blow it up further, it does the same thing. It goes from being that wonderful 16-bit you want, and you put the 8-bit, now all of a sudden you have pixelation in the waveforms. It's not smooth sines, cosines, or sharp points where it's supposed to be. So you're having a loss of information, just like when we store other data, where there's lossless and non-lossless choices. It's all in the compression. Well, we change it, we could lose a lot of it, so you start big, then work small. Load time restrictions, space for load. As I said before, downloadable games, rule of thumb, 5 meg is your overall sound quality. Anything over that, and it could cause too much load time. This gets better now with more and more advances in technology, but some of the things that make or break games is that load time. If you're sitting there and you're waiting for that page to load, or like even a web page when you're surfing, it takes too long to load, you're bored, you go somewhere else. It ain't worth it. I don't want to do that. Well, if the game takes too long to load up, or too long in between parts, you're just like, I don't like it. Even if it's a great game. That alone, that initial image can ruin a lot of it. Then you have space of load and game design, or chunking. When you're looking at the space of load, in sound there are different sound effects that load different ways. Just like there's certain images that load different ways in the different environments. Some overall world environments, when it loads up, you have the background environmental noise. It loads when it begins loads. But then you have maybe a boss section, and that may or may not have that music sitting there already loaded to play, or it may load it when you enter that zone, which is a colored chunking or zoning, depending on how you look at it in different environments, or different frames when you get to the next section in the game, depending on what game engine you're designing in and what style of game. They have different terminology, but it basically means the same thing. I'm changing from this area to that area. Is there pieces I'm saving from the first part that are still playing at this part? So is there a background noise that's playing constantly through even though I walk through the door, or does when I walk through this door and go to this next area, does it load up a whole new chunk? So that goes into the game design and how it plays, but it also causes you to look at your restrictions and requirements for the sound. You also have to look at, like I said, what file types it'll take. There's WAV, MP3, AIF, OGGs, OGGs, MIDI files. These are all different sound files. There's hundreds of more codecs of different types of sound files. You know, there's kids at MIT that make these different compression things for fun. Just because you may see it's better, you know, I can get this whole music file in this itty bitty little space, doesn't mean the game system you're using is going to accept it. So just because something is better doesn't mean it's that whole beta VHS stuff, CD and everything else. You have to look at what is being used by the program you're using. What will it accept? Before you can go in and say, oh man, this is really cool. It's so much safer, I can save the space. Yeah, but it doesn't accept it. Other things too is when you're looking at media-rich files and WAV files versus some of the other ones. Inside a lot of systems, they have some mild tweaks you can do with sound that are built into the game environment or built into the program you're using. Like even Flash, you have some mild tools inside this program that you can do music adjustments with. Be it looping the music over, or be it some tone or pitch shifts. Just usually some minute things. The big one is looping. Reason being is by able to having a small little thing, just like when we tile textures, to have a smaller piece that can cover a larger area. Same with the music. It's a smaller piece, it takes less space, we move it over. We got to be careful when we import some files. WAV is a big one, or sort of media-rich files, that when you loop them, they don't necessarily cause a seamless loop. In some of the programs, it kind of has a little bit of an overlap or a little bit of a space. It doesn't go right away. So you have to see what you can use and what works better in that system. And a matter of that is, put it in and listen to it. Play with it. Don't just go, we'll use this and slap it in. Don't be afraid with any of these. Just keep futzing with it, messing with it, practicing. Everything you do gets you a little bit better at it. Just like drawing. You sketch a little bit here, you swing a little line there. You know, oh, you're doodling again. Yeah. Well, it's keeping up in the practice and the skill. It's honing it, regardless of how small or minute it is. Even listening to music over and over again gets you a better ear for understanding, especially when you start thinking about the music. How does it sound? What does it sound? Versus just going, oh yeah, it's a good beat. You know, oh, that sounds cool. I like how that rises and that falls, and I like how they mix this here. You know, you might not say that to yourself, but you kind of hear it and think it. If you do say it to yourself, there are psychiatrists.
All right. That's enough.
Or for the rest of us gamers. Here's an example of a great big list of different styles of codexes that music compression is. Like I said, there's all sorts of different ones. This is actually a condensed list. I believe this one is all the different file formats Audacity uses. Why I'm recommending and talking Audacity, it's one that we generally can use at school. It is a free download, so that's within most of our budgets, versus like Adobe Audition. Would most of us love to have it? Well, most of us that seen it would. However, the price tag on it says otherwise. So we go with what we can use. We're on a budget as students, because we're here to learn, and we go with what we can get. Again, like I said, large list of these ones. These ones are all different files. Some of these different lists, Sound Designer 2, NTM files, 3MS. I was talking before on that, you saw where I was mentioning proprietary. Some of these different formats are exactly that. They're a codex that's proprietary to that specific system, and until other people accept it or pick it up, it only works for those systems or someone else that shares with it. However, if you happen to have other of those files, you're using them like that, and like Audacity or another one accepts them, they can also render out that file into another format. The example I had in the past was we were working with a file called Goldwave. Put it in because it might change some of the stuff just in rendering. Example I had in the past was we were working with a file called Goldwave, which is similar to Audacity in its function. It's a sound editor where you get the waves, you can take samples of different things, and you can do some mild effects like volume changes or a fade in or a fade out. And we were using that for some audio capture because we were doing an overall sound of a bunch of different music. It was kind of a compilation. But then we were using that for the capture, and then we were using, at the time it was called acid jazz. I put it in because it might change some of the stuff just in rendering. Example, which now it's Acid Pro 6.0, so this is a little bit older. It's at 2.0, and this is now at 6.0, so 10 years ago. That would be usable. But I always listen to it before. But what happened was, because even though we had everything set the same, we're like, we want this at 16-bit at so many hertz, which recognizes the file, and then we imported it, and we're still using that same rating. Just because of its file type, there was a small sound pitch shift. It went from being something like C sharp to like C flat in tone, which really kind of ruined it, because now it doesn't even sound like the same song. I mean, if you play a musical instrument or well, I can't show you, I don't have the file here. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a trick you can use on some things. But just a small pitch shift in some of the tones, especially with electronic sounds, makes it completely different. If you're doing, like, if you're making your own synth sounds from sound waves in a program like Cool, it actually shows you different sounds, where your standard sound wave is the nice S curve. You can get more of a sharp tone by like a triangle wave, and then a white noise is a whole bunch of squiggly lines. Well, when you're looking at some of the hard-hitting drum notes, a drum note might look like in bass sound a square wave, and that's how you do it. And then it's based on the elevations of the size of the wave, which shows a thing called a tack, which is what they call is the overall strength of volume that that thing can hit, which is measured in decibels. But by adding another noise filter into it that's a little more squonky or ugly, you can end up turning that drum beat into a snare drum. That's just by simple little pitch shifting of one more beat thrown onto it with a little bit of, and all it is something small and insignificant. Well, you throw a whole shift in pitch on an entire song and you have that same effect. If it's a digital song, you have that same complete effect change where some sounds are going to sound completely different. So that's why you have to be careful and always double check what you're listening to. Back to mood, style, and emotion. Like it says, this is mood, style, and emotion. Like we were talking about earlier. Like I said, mentioned Call of Duty. It'd be funny using the Mario sounds. So you have to adhere to what that style is. What are you looking for, cartoon or not? What emotion it is, adventure, suspense, or if this is the happy-go-lucky reward zone. Yep, click, 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 bang. Number and type of sounds. The different sounds and their placement can generally enhance the game or give it a unique feel, such as reward sounds effects or different like that. Like I said before, Call of Duty Mario sounds not going to work. Horror movie, no sound at all, or happy-go-lucky music. Maybe it's a spoof when you see those movies, Scream 2 or whatever they were, the offshoots of that one. Scary Movie, where they did weird, wanky things. Well, that was, comic relief, different type of feel altogether, even though they're kind of showing the same scene. Weird guy in a scream mask going to kill someone. Different music, different effect. Now it's a parody, it's funny. Over there, it's kind of creepy and scary, all based off of one small change: sound. Then we're looking at, in there are the certain types of sounds we're looking at. The types of sounds are the ambience, noise effects, special effects, and interface effects. The ambient sound is your environmental sound or background noise. When you're walking outside, you hear birds chirping maybe, or there's a rushing river. Those different things kind of bring up different images as you're walking through the woods, Or are you walking through a factory where you hear the clanging of metal in the background or other things that are happening? Those can really enrich a game if they're done properly. In a sane asylum, in the background you might hear weird people screaming or some whispering of weird voices, and kind of makes this eerie feel, and it's his background noise. I played a game a long time ago called Burn Cycle, and the premise of the game was you wake up and realize that you're dead, and you have 30 seconds inside this fake realm to figure out how you died so you might actually live. And it's a really interesting thing, but the soundtrack on it is what kind of made the game. Where you're sitting there and you're talking to this one person, and then they tell you to go over to this other zone, and you walk over to this other zone, and all of a sudden you're in this weird area, and there's stuff, weird slime stuff everywhere else. You're like, whatever, it's just some weird alien crap. But it's the sounds in the background that all of a sudden get to you, where you hear the deep-seated evil voice whispering to you how they're coming for you. It's just, oh, that's kind of creepy. And things like that as an example. Or even in the Call of Duty game or in some of the Army games, you hear gunshot off in the distance at a different volume. So, it's off in the distance, so they're not close to you, so you're feeling safe. It's a little lower quality. Maybe there's a slight shift change in the tone because it's reverbing off of however they changed it, but you can tell it's not close. As you're walking through, getting closer, those sound effects maybe get louder. So that's when you're looking at partially environmental effects. Normal sounds in the game are sounds from typical functions. Be it you're shooting your gun, maybe you hear that, or it's a dancing game, and maybe when you hit different moves, it kind of makes extra sound effects. Or like Guitar Hero, the normal function is the strumming. So there's different sounds. You play the key right, it plays the note. Those are the normal functioning sounds. Special effects sounds are more of your payoff sounds or reward or caution sounds. Like you're entered in a danger zone inside a factory, and all of a sudden you hear the alarm go off. Beep, 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 beep. Oh man, I'm not supposed to be here. Or you get extra rewards when you, in that same game, blow up a building. Well, the reward part of that is the payoff is in the sound. Wow, I really blew that building up. I made a huge explosion. That's cool. It builds up that excitement. It's just like a little cookie you're giving them, just like any other reward in the game. And when we do a design on the game, that's one of the things we're looking at: consequences, rewards. That's another form of reward. When they do something like that, it's, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. Or people do weird things in some of the Raven games where they'll go up and they'll shoot stuff that they don't normally shoot. And all of a sudden it makes a weird noise and blows up. They're like, oh, cool. Or they grab at the club and they're like, vending machine. Hey, I broke it. Just stuff like that encourages them to keep playing and enriches it further. Then there's their interface sounds, which are non-gameplay sounds, like when you hit the pause button, or maybe you have a scroll item over here that lets you switch weapons, or some other menu comes up. Just like when you're on an interface with a GUI, you open up the windows, window noise starts. It's the same kind of idea. Anything that's not technically directly derived in the game. Those are your interface sounds. Now, we're back to on our skills and our resources. What programs are at our disposal, like we mentioned before. What can, if anything, the game engine or program for making the game do? What elements does it have that allow you to change it. Like I said, most of them have a looping format. Some of them have pitch shifting or some other small minute things. What that allows you to do then is less sounds, less files, so you can keep it down. If you have a volume and pitch shift in the game, that same machine gun your hero's shooting over here, well, with a little bit of change over here, it can be that same machine gun the bad guys are shooting, but it sounds different, so you can identify it when you hear it, and you're saving space because it was a change inside the game itself, depending on what it has for the power of that. Then you're looking at who has a clue of what things to do. Like I said, you might have someone that's great, someone that doesn't. Yeah, it may, like I said here, it may seem like you want to have kick sounds, but no one really wants to do the sounds half the time. Like I said, it's the forgotten child, or they add it on after. It's something everyone wants. Oh, it's got to sound great, but a lot of people don't want to do it. Hopefully you're not those people. It goes on the power of P's, which if you haven't heard, it's perfect practice prevents piss poor performance.
Okay.
What that means
That's
is,
not really it.
if you do it right up front, and you don't just slap it on later, you're preventing junk at the end. If you keep it consistent, you start at the beginning, you're part of the design, you look at the sounds, you consider it an actual piece of everything else, and don't just slap the sound on after, your end product is not going to be poor, it'll be better. So there's other ways that they say power P's. That was the most edited one. Alright, that's that part. If anyone wants a break, now's a good time. If you don't, we can trudge along. I personally need something to drink. Now we're going to get into part 2, tools and file tricks of the trade. Sorry, Kenny. Starting off with some of the base tools. Obviously, the software, they provide different levels of editing, which if you look on the keyword sheet, when I was covering some of it here, you see that I mentioned for software and hardware, because they're both. We're looking at multi-track recording, sound editing, synthesizing, sequencing, and drum machines. They are actually all different. A multi-track recorder, a good one has some of the other types of features built into it, like Audition, like Pro, like Cakewalk, some of the bigger guys like I mentioned down here. Audition, Cool Edit, Audacity, Vegas, Sonar, Rapture, all have some of those features integrated in together. But when you look at the individual components, and some of the freeware that you can use are just simply one portion of it. Multi-track recorder, Audacity, you have the ability to have more than one sound effect or music in each one of those bars, which is the track. Some things are, you're looking at tracks can be a itty-bitty little sound of just like one beat. Or a track can be the entire song if you happen to put a song in there. Then we're looking at sound editors. Some of the different editing features are more in depth, where you can get into the individual chunks of the different sound designs for the wave, or where some of them just have generic, I select the dither effect, or I select flange, which are all different musical terms, which for some of these you're just going to have to play with to see the sound effect it does. But instead of having individual small control, it just kind of does it for you. And then you just say, by a slider bar or picking a number, how much of this particular sound effect do I want to apply to that? I'll show you some of the different. Alright, here's, this one is Acid, by Sound Foundry, Sony product. I got some other ones I'll show you. But here's the basics of one of these sound programs. A little bit more complex than Audacity. These are, like I said, the multiple tracks. So each one of these you see is sine, cosine waves. It's that same sound wave. And what they're doing, just like a picture, is they're painting the sound wave on. You're just and through the different tools, which one's a paintbrush, eraser, features are similar to in some of the drawing programs. We can add in, cut out, erase, and then we can apply different effects via some of the different buttons up here. Down here, as we see, like the decibels, so we're looking at different volumes. Right here, there's tempo. For the sake of all of us, we're going to probably not pay attention to 2-2-2-4, because that's more so in the hardcore musical design, where then we got to understand stress on stress, beats, and musical counts. For us to make it a lot easier, focus on the thing called BPM. It makes it a lot easier and simplistic, because that just means beats per minute. How many times does it go dum 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 per minute? So that's what sets the speed and rate. Generically, slide it down this way, everything plays slower. Slide it this way, everything plays faster. These features are on all of those sound programs. I'm covering the ones that are on all of them versus the individual ones, because there are some proprietary functions that are different. In this particular file, they have, which we're familiar with if we've used Windows, is the file scrolling, where you see the different things. Well, this one has sound files in it, and then whatever appropriate files can be used over here. Open up another file, and then it'll do a pre-play of the file down here. You click on it, you can listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's the sound I want. So then you bring it up here, and then you can distribute length of play. This one is more so looking at designing your own sound, versus Audacity is looking at capturing or editing an already made sound. So it's the full song. I want to take a chunk of the song, but you can take that in here too. But so you know the difference, to pull off something like this in Audacity would take a lot of Audacity. Would be difficult.
What's the name of this program again?
This one is, and there is a free download for their older version off Sony. This one's called Acid Pro.
Okay.
This particular one is 4.0. They have 5.0 free for download or 6.0 free for purchase.
Is that on here? Is that on your list?
It's on there.
Okay.
It's on my useful links list. Looking at Adobe, what we were looking at, a version of Cakewalk, which is another sound.
The only thing it doesn't say Acid Pro. How do we know which one of those is Acid Pro?
Acid Planet.
Huh?
Is it Sony Creative Software or is it Acid Planet?
She said it's a list of potentially useful links.
Up here, under the big boy products.
Oh, okay.
Cakewalk, Sonar, Rapture.
Oh, okay, with that.
A lot of these will have maybe a demo version, or they give you an older version for free for use and download. If you're producing anything for sale and replication, and we're going to cover over copywriting in a little bit, pay attention to the user agreement. Actually read it. Some of them have limited user agreements, where if you did produce something with this and make monetary gain off of it, you're in violation of that user agreement.
Okay.
So that's the same with, and we'll get into that in the copywriting. Acid's fine. I don't know about the Adobe product, because they do have, I think, their older version of it free for download. But I haven't read through that user agreement. So if you decide to use something like Audition and get that free download from them, if you are producing something for monetary gain, please read that user agreement.
Okay.
Enough on that. But this one's called Cakewalk, and you see some of the similar features where, so it's a matter of what's your visual appeal on some of these. Here's my different sound effects, all my different waves. This one's a little zoomed out. This one has a feature in it right here. This is actually keyboarding and scales,
Okay.
which both the other two programs we mentioned now have that as an add-in feature in their newest editions. This is like based off of the MIDI we were talking about before, where you could play the individual note, and then you play that note, or you could even pull up a picture and look at what chords are and set the chord, and then let it play, and you put the sound in, and then it sets and plays it for you without having to have the skill. So then you're making your keyboard sound based off of keys and pitch, and you can bring that up into here. Hey, look, now you're a pianist. Without ever having to pay for music lessons. Then we get into some of the other, the decibel bars. Here's where you're going to get into some of the other terminology, which is decibels for volume. On the waves, there's two different sounds that they're generally looking at. That's what we're going to go into probably the first page of this. We're not going to cover the whole. Wonderful.
Okay.
Read that at your own kind of discretion, just because there's a lot more information. We just want to get the overview for now. Let's see, we'll go back to the rest of those. The sound components, this is what we're going to start looking at those. Sound components generally measured in hertz. It's the measure of the frequency, like in math, the sine and cosine. The other term you're going to see or on there is it's the small d capital B, which is decibels. It's not actually spelled B-E-L-L-S anymore. It's been changed. However, originally it was decibels because it was done by Alexander Graham Bell, which is where the original name came from. The reason they call it decibels is because of the sound range we can hear in. They don't call them bells because it's such a large range. They had to do it in increments of 10 to try to cover most of it, hence decibels. That covers the actual loudness of it. The digital audio sampling is the sample rate, which is how many samples per minute or per second. That's showing the overall quality, which is how many times do I check that frequency to make sure how clear that picture is for my recorded time. You know, do I only check it once without ever going over it again? And that's based on your speed of equipment. I just look at it once and then paint the picture. Think about if you saw a picture of the Mona Lisa and I asked you to draw it for me. Or say, I'll let you look at it 16 times as you're drawing it, you know, which is generally going to be more accurate. That's where that whole sample rate comes in. It's more clear the more times I'm allowed to look at it when I'm making the sound. So that covers the basics we need to know on those particular types of words. If you look at the sheet, it shows you some of the ranges, just so you kind of get an idea. When we're looking at base frequency, which is on the first page, we'll look for the, well, you guys don't have color. There's a section where it says 60, 40, 4,000.
Yeah.
It kind of gives you an idea of the human ear where we're hearing it is audible on that frequency. Where, you know, 60 hertz it's very, very low. 440 hertz is looking like A sharp area, it's okay. 4,000 hertz is very audible. Then we start getting up there into 13,000 hertz. That's going to start to hurt the ear. And then anything higher than that is more like, you know, if you think about an ultrasonic dog whistle, it's still making that sound, but because of the pitch of it and the size of the wave it produces in the air, just we can't hear it, but perhaps like the membrane on a dog's ear obviously can hear it because they hear it at different frequencies than we do. Then we'd mentioned the decibels, they're measured in 10. If you go further down on the page, it kind of shows you some examples of how decibels, which is loud, covers where your level is, and where they show you 0 is actually the mid-range. They kind of measure it different than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0 is generally the maximum level. Going into your negative numbers is where it starts to power down, which is where on that orange bar that was over here, where they show the different, it had the bracket in the middle was actually 0, and it had a scale up and down from there. That's the base principles on the sound that we would need to know. We'll cover the hertz a little bit more when we get to files. But back to other sound tools. Other than that, the software, things you might want to use to start recording your own sounds. You might want to look at microphones. Quality of the microphone does make a difference. There are techniques to clear out background noise that you can use, but remember they can only clean up so much. There's only so many different ways to filter stuff out, especially if it's already recorded on there, without losing the quality of the original sound. Then there's also, if you have the money, mixing boards and sound boards. Those are actually other equipment that can hook directly into your computer and work hand in hand with all these programs. That's the one where instead of seeing the tracks and adjusting the tracks, you actually have it down in front of you and you can play with it that way. Some people prefer one way or the other. And then, of course, we can't forget equipment needed, playback, speakers and headset. One of the problems with Audacity is it doesn't have an automatic playback for some of the stuff. Unless there's like add-ons you can get. I don't happen to have them, and I don't know where they are, but I've been told of them. Ask Sean, he might be able to. Audacity playback, automatic playback without having to render. Does it have it? Okay. So you want to look and make sure that that works. So when you're editing something, as you're doing it, you can hear it through the program without having to spend the extra time playing it back into another format, and then playing it back through Media Player or through the game you're implementing it in. So you can kind of get the scope of the thing there. Now, here's where we're going to start getting into a little bit of some of the copywriting and legalities, because we're looking at files. First part is collection and creation. You can collect sounds from the web. I did give some sources that are okay on there to use. Obviously, you need to be careful of sound quality, but the big thing is make sure you're legal. There are copyright laws in place. I don't know if everyone's kind of heard some of the copyright laws, like you can use 30 seconds or whatever. Well, that's actually kind of sticky, because that's if you're a K through 12 or music instructor. It doesn't necessarily cover us. I've been through the law reading it. I included 2 websites you can look at that show changing copyright law. Another one that I've heard some of the kids talk about is poor man's copyright. Doesn't exist anymore. That's where they mail themselves something in the mail, and because of the postage stamp, yada yada yada. As the new copyright laws actually work, as an example, if I write an email, if I created a word, if I made a paper, any of that, just by me creating it, it is covered under copyright. I made it. There isn't anything you have to worry about in that aspect, other than in court where it's a civil case versus a criminal case. Proof of burden is in there. It's not innocent until proven guilty, because it's a different court of law.
Just make sure that you give credit to whoever made the stuff. If you didn't do it yourself, don't take credit for it. That's all you gotta do in life, and you'll be fine.
Even in the games, it doesn't work like that with music.
I know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, you have to actually contact them for permission.
You do, but so many times.
Pay royalties.
You do. So that's all I'm saying. Just don't try to rip anything off.
So, yeah, instead of me, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get further into it on the legality of it. Just, honestly, best thing to do, avoid it, make your own, and make sure it's free to begin with.
There is a company that we saw out at GDC when we went
that?
out to the game conference. I think it's on the web Killer Tracks. I can find the exact website, but they sell audio tracks that you can use to put into your games.
There's stuff out there, you just gotta pay for it.
Yeah. Then there's also things of public record. That's actually kind of funny. For the time frame on anything that's of public domain for recorded, it's anything that was recorded before 1922. If it was recorded prior to 1922, it was 22. So 95. Sonny Bono law extended it from 75 to 85 years. The new public domain law is, it doesn't have an extension. Anything that was created now is still under protection of copyright up to 70 years after the passing away of the last person involved in the creation of it. So if there's multiple people, it's still protected 70 years after the last person passes away. So we're looking at, was it 75, 95? There won't be anything added to public domain until 2019. So there'll be anything new that's automatically in public domain because it's so old, due to the extension of the original law that's temporary. It's the Sonny Bono law, yes. It's the Sonny Bono you're thinking of. Watch out for that tree. Yeah, 1922, but here's the thing. Think of the sound quality that they had back in 1922. Unless you're making a nostalgic type game and you want that kind of sound, or like Fallout, the game Fallout where everything was, 1920s, 1940s because it was post-apocalyptic, they might use some of that. If that's the style you're going for, great. You have lots of resources. Go to your library. It's free. Other than that, you're kind of stuck.
So, curious, you said stick to the known or accredited music libraries.
Yep.
How would a person find known or accredited music libraries? Just
they will show information right on their website, such as BBC links generally. Just take a little bit of time to look at it. Large companies have their own files sometimes. Like two of the ones on there are owned by large companies. Sony owns one of the ones on there, and the files that they have on there, they're sample portions of purchasable libraries. The samples are free for use.
So if I look up purchase soundtracks or free soundtracks, is that going to help me get to some choices? I mean, what if you don't know where to start? You want to just look at
If you're wanting to look into something like that, you could put in downloadable music libraries or downloadable sound libraries.
Okay.
And then it's one of those.
Yeah, but if a person didn't have this, I just want to make sure. I guess they'll just call you. They'll call you.
It's just like any other website. When you're checking for validity of kind of a website, you kind of have to see where the website came from, who owns the website. You do have to do a little bit of research. And honestly, it's worth it in the long run, especially if you are producing something that's going to be used. Because a lot of those like free websites that look like, you know, your cousin made it are stealing sounds from other libraries.
Yeah.
For instance, if I were to purchase a CD for that library, there are agreements in the purchase of that, saying like I may own up to so many copies of it. I alone am allowed to reuse and produce the sounds. I may not redistribute the library for other people's use. That's generally in there because they need to make their money off the library. That is that entitles me to so much use based off that contract for purchase. So what happens is you get some of those people that purchase those and think, oh, I just don't like this company, and I'll submit it all online. Or, hey, I put it in and I changed a little bit of something on that sound. With sound, even if you change a little bit of something on it, it's still not your original sound. It doesn't count. That's still their sound. Just like in writing, fan works. Like I read this really cool story and I decided to use some of the characters and write another, fan-based fiction. Is technically infringement on copyright law because they're not using their original creative properties. Same with the sound. That's not my original creative property. I took it from somewhere else. It doesn't matter what I filtered it through, what I did to it. I didn't have legal rights to begin with. It's still technically their sound, and you could end up in court, and that's all based off of whatever monetary loss or gain is based. But that gets into some ugly stuff, which you can research on if you want to. There are some good sites on some stuff that I put in there under legal stuff on the links that you might want to check out. One is specifically looking at the education, what rights do educators have for music, and that's where if you read through all of it, I'll give you the big gist. We are not protected to use 30 seconds of whatever song we want. We are not K through 12, and we are not specifically music instructors. So that whole thing, I've been told by other instructors, I went and researched it and looked it up, not true. So forget it right there. You can't use 30 seconds of your favorite song and throw it in and be safe and protected by the fair use clause. That should probably, unfortunately, you have to delve into the website. You can do a who is on the website, which is you type in who is, one word, type in the name of the website, and it can probably show you if it's proprietary, owned by some other company or things like that. You can contact the person directly. Usually they have a contact feature on it.
Okay.
There are some certifications that you can see on different websites, but even then, the certifications, you have to research into those. They become a big ugly mess. So go to ones generally from large companies if you can.
Yeah.
Is the easiest way.
Okay.
Or the next part, make your own. You can, with a sound and some software, make your own. You need an explosion sound. You can go get a couple different sounds. You could smack a garbage can together, and you could go out and you could kick a log down a hill. Take those two sounds, mix them together, and you can all of a sudden, boom, make an explosion sound. Just by doing some simple tweaks. And then it's all yours. You create it yourself. You can take it from anyone else. You just have a little microphone and went, record this, put it into Audacity, put it into one of the other programs, lay it over with another sound effect, do some shift changes on some of the different things that we'll show you on them, and voila, you have your own sound. I don't know if I can get into that whole thing with the walkthrough, the whole making the explosion thing. I put the tutorial on there. But Where are we on to next? Yeah, that was make your own. So when in doubt, go to caution. Best thing you can do. File storage. Save backups. Save often. Did I mention save? Just like in anything else. Save, 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 save. Because if you don't save, you lose it, it's gone. Define a naming convention and make sure that's intuitive. You will find this in a lot of your classes going through, and it'll help you in a lot of aspects. Basically, I think of it this way. If you went to a library and they just had the books thrown everywhere, and you said, well, I need a book on prehistoric or Jurassic era, specifically on yada, yada, yada. And it's in there somewhere. Good luck. Well, that's what happens to an ugly desktop. That's what happens to all these files. If you can't identify a name, then also you're going through and you're clicking on all these different sound files, trying to figure out which one is which until you hear the one you finally want. Or you killed 3 days for one song. So look at a different naming convention for it. Make the files for use separate than your library collection. What that means is I have over 500 gigs of sound effects, not to mention over 500 gigs of music. On that 500 gigs of sound effects, if I'm going to be using a sound effect for a particular game or something, I'm going to haul it over into its own separate file and make a copy of it, and that's the little file I'm going to use for it. Just like any other of the naming conventions, what I personally do is I try to name the type of sound effect it is and identify its location. So you start off with something like, this is for, in my file for whatever game, we'll call it skunk. So I have my skunk.
Can you use a different writing utensil,
Yeah, that one's nice.
Yeah, toss it. Just don't throw it in the garbage. Thank you.
No, there is another one here.
Oh, great. I have one.
There's more over here now. It's not much better.
Sorry.
Wow, short. There's my NBA career. Hey, that one works. All right. So I would start with my main file, and I'd say skunk sounds. So our game's name's skunk. We did a file, easily identified. Skunk sounds. Hey, here's a file, skunk sounds. Fantastic. You might even do a sub-file then where you do background, environment, noise effects. Generally, I just do two, music and effects, because it's easier that way. Even though there's breakdowns in how they're used, they're generally two different types. Music, a little bit larger file, sound effects, a bunch of little bit smaller files. And then even when you get into there, you're looking at where are they used. So let's say we're doing a multi-level game. So the first one is, we've got mission 1, background, music, and then AI, whatever the file extension is. So then I know by my nomenclature, I have mission 1 background music part A. It's that way I can easily go back to it. I can go through the file and go, hey, that's what that is, that's what that is. I go to implement it into the system. I already know, all right, I want to upload this into this spot. I go through the file, I go music skunk file, and bing, it's right there. Instead of having some weird nomenclature, you're like, I don't know what that is. So learn to do that. Learn to get a naming convention that you can identify. On iDev Games, which is on there for a tutorial, which is a cell phone game and Mac game company. They're kind of like, that's their little chat space forums, just like we have Game Dev and other places have theirs. They do a lot of chat on that. They have inside there, if you search for an article on different ways to do naming conventions. Just like the initial file we had was called 8.3, which is 8 letters, dot, and then the $3 extension. That's where we get that .aif, we get the .wa. That was the initial constraint that they used for naming traditional files, which links into what is known as AWE, which is address window extensions, which then gets into different file management stuff. We don't need to cover into that. But take a look at theirs if you want. They give a convention that's similar to mine, a little bit different, but they're stressing the same thing. Identifiable, make it intuitive. So that way when I hand you the file and now you're working on it, you can look at it and go, I guess mission 1, BG, background music, all right, I got that. So it's intuitive enough so maybe the person that's working the game with you can see it and figure out what it is without having to go, huh? And then call you up and ask you, or sit and listen to it and try to figure out what it is. So intuitive, and it's going to be the same with your artwork, with anything else. Just a big recommendation for everything, make it intuitive. You get into programming, the teachers are going to stress it for you too. And so it's the same all the way through. 3D modeling for these games that we're putting the music into. The different layers and portions, you want to make it intuitive so you can name it for what it is. Because obviously square 1, square 2, and square 3, and you're making this robot with arms, and you don't know which one's which. And then it gets too confusing, and you're losing time. Music, same thing.
It's also a good idea to put it in your game doc.
What does that mean?
Put in what your different, how you're organizing it in your game doc. So then someone can look at your documentation and go, oh, that's how
Game
these
doc
files.
is your map for the game,
Yeah.
and
It's your master plan.
yeah, it's here's the plan, here's the blueprints, here's everything we want to do, and
So it's a short document.
yeah,
Thank you.
game document. In there, you have your music section. You can then lay out your same system like you said, so it's included in your game doc. So then, not only is it intuitive to you and the other developers, but maybe someone else that's looking at the game too that needs to know a little bit more about it.
Thanks.
Now we're going to go into the individual editing aspect, and then hopefully this will lead us into actually getting the chunk of the program. Once again, save before, save during, save after. Reason being, I did something really fun to the sound, I go and render it out, something happens, I go back, I didn't save it even though I rendered it out. I open the WAV file back up, I may have a sound effect changed over here that I turned into a WAV file or an AFI file, and then I pull back up this is where it gets confusing, the WAV versus the WAV file. So I pull back up the visual WAV and the thing that I just sent out, well, I didn't save the visual WAV with the change. Crap. So all that work was lost. So anything else you want to tweak and peek. So that's the save during, save after. Remember, before you hit render, hit save. If you make any big changes, hit save. Like I said, I mentioned, generally work from high quality, then make lower quality on the final render, because you cannot go back. There is no backtracking on it. You'd have to start the whole thing over. If you take something and we're going to compress it down smaller, just like the picture, it's going to pixelate, we're going to lose quality. We can't blow that back up and expect to have that same quality after we shrunk it down. It's not a vector image, sorry. It is lost. And then that's that show. So, looking at Audacity here, we see I wish I had the other program I'm better at.
I can talk to it.
If you want to show them this one, you probably got this one better than I do. I'm a full shop worker. Generally, what this is this is the stage we're mentioning working at. You can import the music in different ways. You can do a file and import, or you can actually, with Audacity, just grab whatever sound effect you want. Nice. Say for instance, this song here, and we slip it in, converts it over from the MP3 file into the WAV format, not to be confused with WAV file again. And then we have our song put in there, right here, which is the full song, from beginning to end.
What, that right there that you're pointing at is what you just put
This
in?
one down here is the one I just brought in.
And what was on the top?
This was the piece that we just had up before for showing.
Okay.
That was, so we want to focus on this bottom one for now.
Why is there two of them added on?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
As we're going through, we mentioned about decibels. They start at base 0, go up and down. The highest that it goes is also known as the attack, which is measured in decibels. That's the highest decibel it hits at. There is what's called like averages. There's a mean average, which is the standard decibel level of the song. If we're looking at doing manual compression, which is trying to get cigar, it's called cigar music. Where's my file? What it means by cigar is when you're looking at, and I believe I put this online for you guys to look at too. I forgot to cover compression first, sorry. There's a couple key things that we want to look at. Is this clear enough for you guys to see up here? Is it kind of fuzzy?
Alright.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Okay. This is a base arc of the overall sounding of the wave. The principle of the things you want to look at, which even if you don't know the terminology, you just need to know where they're located on the program, which we'll show you from back and forth. The keywords for compression that we want to pay attention to are threshold, attack, ratio, release, and output. Ratio is basically how far up and down the fader goes, which is there's a little button when the music plays on these programs, and basically it shows how far up and down it goes for the ratio. Release time, how far is it away from the original position. They're all basically on the whole thing is it's a matter of how far can I move the different chunks of the file to make it smaller. That's the idea of compression. These are the complex, if I'm a music theater person, you know, but the reason we need to know them is when we pull up the programs, that's what they're going to see. You know, this is the attack, this is the release, threshold, and then the rates, my decibels. So we need to kind of understand these basics. As this gentleman calls it, a dwarf. I didn't realize I put the dwarf on here, I apologize. The compression is basically works like, as he says, a very quick dwarf. You simply tell the dwarf to keep the sound at a certain volume. The dwarf then listens to the sound that's passed to him and whacks the fader when it's too loud or too soft. So leave it to the Swedish gentleman to describe it as a dwarf. But it's the same principle. As that little thing goes up and down, there's an invisible program in there that's trying to regulate the movement of it to try to keep it within certain parameters to compress it smaller without losing some of the original sound effects. So that's where, this is when we do manual compressions. A lot of these other programs have sound effect features and everything else that kind of shoot past this level. So without having to get this complex, we can use Audacity. Audacity has fade in, fade out, and probably squelch, distort. Some of these are different sound effects, and there's also compression formats, which change the oversize of the file. So instead of making it into maybe a different file format, I don't necessarily have to change it from an AIF to a WAV to try to save file size. I might be able to compress it somewhat without losing sound quality. But we also have to pay attention to what's the decompression rates. Basically, if I decompress something with this file, I can hear it sounds great, but once again, how does it sound when I implement it into the game? So then again, we have to go back into implementing it back into the game system to make sure that what you decompressed doesn't change how it worked in the game. I'll let Sean go through Audacity's program. I included on here base tutorial for Audacity. The Audacity also covers some of the same stuff we covered. Sample rate, wave. They have some other different standard foil formats, which if you want to take a look at this one online on your own, it applies directly to Audacity in some of their setups and what they do for things. And then here's, yeah, just look at this on your own. It's by default, here's what I was talking about, default sample rate. They're using 44.1 hertz, which I was talking about. That's considered relatively high quality. Then they're at the sample format, which comes in, just worry about for now, the difference between 8, 16, and 32. You don't have to worry about the different types of float formats or non-floater point. Just this sheer fact, bigger means higher quality. So we start bigger, work smaller. So 41 and 32 is their default. That's high quality, that's CD, basic CD purchase quality. A higher quality would then be considered like a DVD quality, is actually considered higher than CD listening quality. That is a perfect one to work at, just like when we work at pictures. 300 DPI is great and fun to work at. 600 is intense, it's crazy, you get a lot of good stuff in there, it's high def. But what happens to load times? Kills your load times. I'm working at 600 versus, hey, it's just a newsprint thing. 200 is more than enough. Same principle, higher, longer load times. Keep that in mind when you're implementing it in the game. All right, I'll hush and let Sean have Audacity.
What do you want to do with it? Talk me through it, I'll do some stuff with it.
Okay. Well, the first thing we did is I showed you how to do an easy implement, just like Photoshop, drop it right in and work it in. That's what we have. We're doing a little Aerosmith song. We're listening to Sweet Emotion. Those of you who don't like Aerosmith, sorry.
Take a sound clip out.
Yeah, we're gonna show how to do a small sampling of a particular sound, where you take a little piece, you make a copy of it basically, copy and paste, kind of like word texting even. Just like a picture, you take a little piece, cut it out, copy and sample it, and then you can bring it over and repeat it, replicate it. You can take a small portion and loop it.
Gary, if you have, if you said you have to say, you have a game and you have the whole song, you said it takes a long time, sometime wait for the whole song to be uploaded, and you said just loop it instead. Why is it better, if it's the same amount of time, why does it make a difference if it's looped or if it's the whole song?
If you plug it, for instance, we're going to use, let me give you an example of a different sound for music than a singing vocal sound. In a lot of games you hear that little like traditional music, like think Mario Brothers. Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, dun. All right, if we say played that song out 15 times, because that's a loop, we play that out 15 times and said, well, this is the whole length of the entire song, and then put that in, that huge 15-part file, it has to load that entire piece from beginning to end.
Okay.
What loop would do then is, well, I recognize that this just repeats at this point, so I only need this much of the song.
Okay.
So that's all it needs to load is that one piece,
Right.
and then it just plays it over and over and over again.
Okay.
So all that other stuff didn't have to load. That's where it comes in. It saves on the load time. You're better allocating your system resources.
Okay, thanks.
All right, he's on the effects. Go through some of them real quick. Change pitch, change speed, change tempo. Tempo and speed is where you work about BPMs and then 3, 3, 4, 4. Probably easier for you guys to stick with just speed for now. Tempo changes a little bit more. It actually can change the overall sound effect. That's the one we want to avoid for what we're doing. Some of the things are exactly what they say, pretty self-explanatory. Echo is exactly that. It adds an echoing effect, kind of that hallway sound to some of the things. Then you have the parameters that came up that you can change that. That's your empty hallway kind of sound. There's on echo delay, like how long does it take for the sound to come back. So maybe you're making an echo sound for a cave, and by the amount of delay it would show them the distance. Things like that you can take and do. That's decay is when the echo comes back. When it releases, because it bounces and releases, how long does it fade before it fades out again? So that's the decay of it. There's a lot of different features that you can do on the effects. What I'm going to highly recommend, yeah, because I could, just on the features alone, I could probably go on for 4 hours. Play with them. throw in a song you like, throw in some different sound effects, throw them in and just play with some of them, see what the different things do. It's the best thing you can possibly do. Is always tinker, never stop. You're going to learn something new every time. Look at forums, read some of the stuff other people are doing. I gave probably about 5 or 6 different websites that are just on audio sound design and development that give things, just like we have different ones for games and things like that. There are links in there for sounds in some of the games when we're looking at it. Read through some of those. It's fun, honestly. I'll play some things from you later. I have brought with the first song I made on a dare before I knew anything about the program. The person said, "Here's some weird sounds," threw them at me and said, "I'll make a song on that." I'm like, okay, I guess, I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I poked around with the program. It took me probably about a day to put it together. And I made a song out of it. And I was actually shocked, and so was the other person. But that was from tinkering and playing with it just out of a day, compared to what I can do with the program now. What I did that took me over a day to produce, I can do in 5 to 10 minutes. Just from playing with the program and getting used to the different features. Here's the chunky cutout. That is the same chunk as highlighted on top, right? Yeah. No?
That was the echo that he made.
It's the chunk after. No, you passed it now, but it was right after the one that was highlighted. And then he looped it once.
Let me just take this chunk right here.
Okay, what he's doing, highlighting the piece that he wants. Then via button functions up here, or I think on some of them you can right click. You can make a copy paste, chunk it out, slide it around, adjust it to, because this is the time frame. This is where, the beginning of what you play to whenever you set it to stop. Here's where the 2 copies of the 2 different pieces.
What'd you do?
This is left and right channel. In recording, think of it as left and right ear if you want. You can make a change to just one and not the other, and it gives a different sound effect. Generally, most of the changes apply to both. But then he's doing the gain feeds over here for left and right. But then change the amount of one place and the other. It allows for you to add multiple effects to one particular thing. Things you have to be aware of though with right and left on some of the different games we implement them in. If you change something up here and something down here and it plays it in the game, so I'm going to say change them equally on this particular, it actually, Dolby surround sounding or things like that can effectively get weird, and like you do right and left changes like that and then one sound plays on one side of their computer while the other sound plays on the other, or with some headsets it only picks up one of the 2 channels. So for what we're doing now, it's easier not to adjust them. If you do adjust them, you have to pay certain attention to rendering. But that's a matter of playing with it and figuring that out.
Do you want to have stereo sound if you're doing like 3D sound effects, where the program figures out?
If you're doing 3D and you wanted to add stereo sound effects, and you wanted that full surround sound effect, you won't be using Audacity. I'll say that right up front. There are some somewhat features that go onto it, but just the way that surround sound is separated and it's tracking, it wouldn't be single tracked and rendered on a single track like that necessarily. It'd have a different type of depth to the recording.
Well, I know like direct sound, you can actually set up like a point where the sound is going to be playing at, and it will adjust your surround sound based on that.
No, I'm not getting sucked into the vortex of your insanity again.
There it goes.
I felt this way before.
killed you before. Didn't take.
So,
Linkin Park.
so you've got them all, on different levels instead of just putting them right behind each one another?
What that happens is,
Each one gets its own layer.
right,
Does-
basically each one gets, so
It
that way
should get
there's.
its own layer
Yes.
too? It
Yeah,
should
you
have-
you can technically, if you wanted to, if they were gonna play back to back and not have any overlap, and
Okay.
no different effects,
Okay,
you could technically slap them onto the same, but then you're limiting yourself in different ways to adjust.
okay.
17 not admitted
What
without
this
verification.
also does too is, see there's a mild overlap here.
I know you're out there.
This one doesn't finish playing until it gets end here,
I
Okay.
know
and
that
this
you're
one
afraid.
starts at that point, so
Okay.
there's a
You're afraid of
smooth
us.
Oh, gotcha.
transition.
You're afraid of
Chop,
change.
chop.
Right, okay.
Basically, at the end, you mix it down, but then you lose the ability to change each of those individually.
Okay, that's true too.
And then, trying to figure out some of this stuff
I'm
on
not getting sucked into the vortex of your
What's the
insanity.
volume on this one? The tracks. On Audacity, mute means you're going to mute this channel. So if you're adjusting multiple together, it stops that one from playing. Solo means only this channel plays. You hear only that one, so you can stop the rest of them, so you can hear. Maybe there's a glitch in there. You're like, where's that coming from? You go through. I think it's this one. You hit solo on it, play it through, and also you found it. Or you can mute it out to make sure maybe that's not the right blend, so then you can listen and play back. This is the volume control, so that way you can change each of these, because you might implement some sound effects from this one, and then another from another program playing together. This one's sound is so low and it was supposed to be loud. When you listened to it before, it's loud. And this thing over here is deafening. Well, you got individual control over each of the sound effects. And I'll show you one of my music archives too, because I have, and you can get them too, for music libraries. They have individual instruments of various sorts that just have A key, B key, C key, a drum, B drum, bass drum. They have things more complex where they might have a 4 on the floor sound where it's like a doom, you know, and it's loopable. So then all of a sudden you go from doom to playing it over and over, or changing some parts of it, and you make a full song out of just a couple of sound effects by matching them together. Not just vocal effects or some of the other songs. So what he's doing is remixing a particular song. What I wanted to show you is the creation of an individual, but I don't know about the sound file implementation of this. So I'll show it to you on one of the pictures and walk you through it and then let you hear it.
I'm gonna have to
You
go
got
see.
any advice for Audacity for me?
Yeah, we might want to cut it.
Play with it, because I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with this. We covered this in with digital information management. This is one of the free tools that we use for that class. And I have the guys, at least I teach it, cut their own songs like I did right here. This was just an